Hello. Welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I'm working through the first book of a trilogy, Love Endures All Things, and I'm on chapter 11 in this first book. This book is the first 15 years that Stephanie and I were married, and it tells about probably the most difficult times in a marriage, and that's learning how to live with each other and still get along. And it's when life is very difficult. You have children, you have all kinds of things that require most of your attention. Chapter 11 talks about spreading my wings. So let's just get right into this. This is a little longer than the last chapter I presented. Spreading my wings. After the difficulties at Stillwell, Stephanie and I decided we needed a change of scenery. The employment office had a sales job, and I decided to apply for it to uh, fill out an application and take the initial interview. I had to go to Muskogee. Stephanie and I took the kids and made a day trip of it. I had to go to Muskogee anyway. When I got there, I took Stephanie and the kids to the park for a picnic. We had all the fixing. There were swings and slides, merry-go-round, all kinds of things for kids to play with at this park, and it had restrooms. I left the family there with confidence they would be okay. I went to my interview. After I filled out the application, they thought that I would be a good candidate. They gave me my first and second interview that day. I was hired for the job, which was centered in Duncan, Oklahoma. I told them I would like to have the job, but I must clear it with my wife. I would let them know within a couple of hours. I went back to the park. We had lunch with my family. Then Stephanie and I talked about the job. I told her we would have to move to Duncan, Oklahoma, which is kind of southeast Oklahoma, or southwest Oklahoma, I'm sorry. That was the center of the territory for this sales job. I told her they would supply me with a van as a sales vehicle, so she would have the car at home. Stephanie was interested in leaving Workman Mountain for greener pastures. We agreed I would take the job. We would move to Duncan and start a new life. We went back home, and I told mom and dad that I had taken a job that meant a move for us to Duncan, Oklahoma. They were sad to see us go, but they said they would help us with the move. I was to start work in 1 week. Stephanie and I drove to Duncan to rented a house near the center of town. I went back to the company and uh, picked up the van that I was to sell from. We went back home. We got busy loading all of our belongings into Dad's truck and trailer. We would have to make the move in one trip. Stephanie drove our car with the kids. I drove the van. Dad drove the truck and trailer with all of our belongings. The move went very smoothly. The job was really quite simple. I carried boxes full of individually wrapped packages of toys and other things. I also had beauty supplies like combs and hairbrushes. I carried supplies like scissors and thimbles. I would go to the store and look at our display rack and simply fill it with what was missing. The job was really quite simple. The first week went quite well. I had sold a large number of items. The next week went about the same. The third week, I had finished my route. The sales dropped off dramatically. The company that had hired me was demanding more sales. I tried to install racks in new stores, but wasn't able to install even one. The territory I worked included several small towns near the Oklahoma Texas border. One of these little stores had a woman about my age working the counter. I thought she was the prettiest woman I'd ever seen in my life. I had a terrible crush on her, so I tried to stop by her store anytime I was in that area. I never said anything to her about how I felt, but she flirted with me as surely as I flirted with her. So the job was not altogether without its benefits. The company complained about my sales. On the sixth week, the van I was driving blew out a recap tire. I was moved I was more than 100 miles from home when this happened. I ended up having to spend my money to buy the tire so I could continue home. I got home very late that day. I called the company and asked for reimbursement. The company promised but never reimbursed me. I allowed 2 paydays to pass to give them time to meet their obligation. They did not. I told Stephanie to grab the kids and I would take the van back to Muskogee and quit this job. Before I left to return the van, a local company had a grocery store and a steakhouse in Duncan, Oklahoma, and they hired me. The job I was hired for was a bag boy in the grocery store. They said that when I when a cashier job opened up, I would be moved into that position. I was happy to pay my dues for a better job. I was happy to be in town instead of out on the road. That made Stephanie happy too. We returned the van and started the next week to settle into the new lifestyle. I had worked at the grocery store for about 5 weeks when I had a terrible accident. My front teeth was a bridge on top. I always got a sandwich out of the freezer section and ran it through the microwave for my lunch. This particular day was a very busy day at the store. When I microwaved my lunch, the center was still frozen. As I bit into the sandwich, the outside was very hot, but the center was a cake of ice. As I bit down, my bridge broke straight across from left to right, and all six of my front teeth fell out. Needless to say, I did not eat lunch that day. I went back to work. I worked the day out. I had 4 children and a lovely wife that I was not going to allow to get hungry because I was embarrassed. I asked if I could come in a little later the next day so that I could take my teeth to the dentist to have them repaired. I worked almost a week with no front teeth. So you talk about making a smile look funny. Anyway, my sacrifice did not go unnoticed. The owner of the company was impressed that I would continue to work through the embarrassment. He took me aside and said he was impressed with my dedication. He asked if I would be interested in being the assistant manager at a steakhouse that he owned. I was very pleased to hear this. So I told him I would let him know the next day. I called Stephanie as soon as he left and told her what he had said. She said, "Take the job." The next morning, Mr. Goodson came in and asked me what I had decided. I told him Stephanie and I had talked it over and I would be pleased to take the job at the steakhouse. He asked me to finish the day up there and report the next morning at 11 o'clock to the steakhouse. He said he would introduce me and I would be trained. I really rather liked the job at the steakhouse because they provided me with my dinner every day. They may have lots they may have lost money on me though through my meal. I had a ribeye steak, Texas toast, a baked potato, and a piece of pecan pie every day for lunch. This was my first job in a restaurant. It was more difficult than I thought it would be. There were lots of preparations that had to be made the night before. There was much service to be done every day. But I learned fast. My boss was happy with me, and Mr. Goodson would come and see me a couple of times a week. I thought he was a very nice man. I liked my job. While I was working there, I met a man named Chris Newman. He was the manager of a Pizza Hut just down the road from, there we go, the Goodson Steakhouse. He was interested in me. He asked me if I would work for him, training to be a manager. He reminded me that the manager of Goodson Steakhouse had been there for 8 years already. He said it could be 10 years before I could become manager at a steakhouse. Mr. Goodson only had one steakhouse. Stephanie and I talked about what Chris had said. After about 14 weeks of Chris trying to convince me, I relented and I told Mr. Goodson that I would work for 2 more weeks, then I would be going to work for Pizza Hut. Mr. Goodson, being the kind of man he was not angry with me, but wished me good luck. He told me this was not the first time that had happened when he had found a good worker. I went to work for Chris Newman in the Pizza Hut on Monday morning. I had already learned many things about working in the restaurant business, so the foundation had already been laid. I was taught how to build pizzas, how to cook it, how to prepare ingredients, and how to make pizza dough. The other things about serving customers I had already learned. When Chris thought I had everything down that I needed to know, he began to teach me how to do the paperwork involved in managing a Pizza Hut. That was a little more difficult for me. After a few weeks, I had mastered that talent as well. I enjoyed being the assistant manager at the Pizza Hut, but it required long hours. One of the employees at the Pizza Hut became my friend. His name was Lyndall. He had a girlfriend named Dawn that he lived with. He and I began to talk. I told him I would like for Stephanie to work with me here at the Pizza Hut, but we had 4 children. Lyndall said his girlfriend would be happy to babysit the kids. I thought that would be a good idea. I told Stephanie about it. Stephanie thought it would be a good idea so that the household could earn more money. She would also have time away from the kids. Lyndall and Don became good friends to us. Stephanie trusted Don as a good babysitter. I talked to Chris, the manager, where I worked, and I asked him to hire Stephanie the next time he needed a waitress. Chris asked me to have Stephanie come into a interview. He hired her that day. Chris did not spend much time at the Pizza Hut. He left me in charge almost all the time. I learned how to schedule waitresses, delivery boys, cooks, and dishwashers. By the time I had worked at Pizza Hut 3 months, I was, in essence, the manager in duties only. Chris was still the manager of the Pizza Hut, but we received letters from the owner telling us about new stores that he was preparing to open. In those letters, he asked for an assistant manager that could be made manager in a store. As usual, an experienced manager from a specific store would want to train into the new store. When that happened, the assistant manager would be considered as manager for the store he vacated. In that way, I was hired as manager of the Elizabeth Street Pizza Hut in Pueblo, Colorado, for the same company. Stephanie and I were so excited that the company moved us to Pueblo, Colorado, at the company's expense. It was the first time we'd ever been moved by a corporation. That felt pretty good. I settled in at the store. I introduced myself to all the employees. I asked them to let me know anything that bothered them, saying we would address it. We still only have one car. Stephanie would drive me to work, then look for a place to live. We were told we would only have 1 month in the motel. Stephanie found us an apartment on a third floor of an apartment complex near the college. You could look out our picture window in the living room and have a perfect view of Pikes Peak, snow covered in early spring until uh, snow covered from late fall until early spring. There we go. That's what I meant to say. It was still winter at Pikes Peak and it was snow capped. It made a beautiful picture. We were happy with this apartment. Someone else moved our furniture into the apartment. We did not have to climb those 3 flights of stairs with the couch or the bed, so it did not occur to us how difficult it would be living on the third floor with no elevator. We got our income tax return, so we went to a discount grocery store in Pueblo and filled our station wagon full of groceries of every kind. When we went back to the apartment, we began carrying the groceries up 3 flights of stairs. We made about 10 trips, each carrying heavy groceries to our kitchen. Stephanie apologized for getting an apartment on the third floor. I told her not to worry. I would look around and see what I could do. Behind the Pizza Hut, where I worked, there was a mobile home park. I put two and two together. I bought a trailer house and had it moved into the mobile home park. It was difficult moving everything from the apartment to the trailer house, but I had a lot of help from people who worked for me. They didn't charge me to help me, so I gave each of them a family night out at the Pizza Hut where they could bring their family, and it was on the house. While I worked in the Pueblo in Pueblo, there came a big dust storm that swept through the town. This storm piled dust and grime into every corner of our house. It would blow in around the doors and around the windows. These dust storms even pitted the paint job on my car. Stephanie thought that this was very unhealthy for all of us. We spoke of moving back to Oklahoma if a store needed a manager there. I made my request known to the corporate office, and I was interested in going back to Duncan as a manager. They told me within 3 months they would be uh, putting a manager in Duncan to replace Chris. They said Chris would be made an area general manager to take care of 3 other stores besides the one in Duncan in that area. I was told that I was the perfect manager, or I was the preferred manager that they wanted. While we lived in Pueblo, mom and dad decided they wanted to move there too. I had been in Pueblo about 3 months when I bought the trailer house. Mom and Dad moved up about a month later. They moved into the trailer house with Stephanie and I. The trailer house was a 3 bedroom mobile home. The front bedroom had access to a bathroom. The bathroom had 2 doors, uh, one to the hall, the other one to the front bedroom. The boys slept in the middle or in the bedroom that the boys slept in that bedroom because it was big. The mobile home had a master bedroom in the back with a master bathroom. Moving down the hall, there was a small bedroom. Michelle slept in that one. The baby slept with us. Mom and Dad, when they moved in, the boys slept in the living room. Carrie slept with Michelle, and Henry slept with my sons in the living room. That little trailer house was very crowded. At that time, I had a Vista Cruise station wagon and a Thunderbird. Mom and Dad did not have money to move out. Stephanie and I talked and decided we would give them our Thunderbird to move Mom and Dad out of our house. I took Dad across the street to the mobile home dealer where he had made a deal. Dad brought a 20-foot wide mobile home. They had a better house than I did. We were glad to have our house back. About 3 months after we gave Dad the Thunderbird, my transfer back to Duncan, Oklahoma came through. The company was going to move my mobile home back to Duncan. This was going to cost them over $3,000. Dad said he would not want to live in Pueblo if I went back to Oklahoma. He asked me to ask the company if they would give me the 3,000 cash so that I could move myself. Dad said he could buy a truck that would move his trailer and mine for the same money. Stephanie and I did not like the idea, but for Mom's sake, we agreed to do that. Dad would drive the truck pulling the trailer because he had been a truck driver for many years. So we went out and bought a 1958 Chevy trailer moving truck. Stephanie and I packed everything we could in our trailer house and set it on the floor and got the trailer ready to move. Because I owned the truck and the trailer house, I did not have to have a special license to move my own trailer. So we began moving my trailer to Duncan, Oklahoma. When that was done, Dad wanted to transfer the title of the truck to his name so that he could move his trailer back to eastern Oklahoma. And I agreed to let him do that if he would sell the truck when he got there and send me the money. He agreed to do so. Time was running out for me to start work. We left Dad in western Oklahoma and we went ahead and got a room in the Duncan area until the trailer was set up. Chris was the manager or general manager now. He came by once or twice a day to check us out, check on us, and to check on the store. His visits were usually about 10 or 11 in the morning and again about 3 in the afternoon. He rarely came by at other times. This gave me a sense of independence that allowed me to run the store with more freedom than other managers I knew in this little town. I opened the store like Chris taught me. I thought of Chris as a good boss because of the freedom he gave us managing the store. Just a minute, Lexi. Come here. Hey, come here. Come here. Come here. You want to see? You want to see yourself on TV? No. Stop doing that. I'm sorry. I have a house full of dogs. Well, two. I thought of Chris as a good boss because of the freedom he gave his managers. He oversaw 4 different stores in different towns. Come here. You want a treat? I don't know what's got her riled up. Chris was a womanizer and considered himself a real ladies' man. This sometimes made it hard to keep the waitresses that were attractive out of his reach. I always warned them about him when I hired them, just in case. I was not bothered by his amorous activities most of the time. Chris flirted with all of the waitresses and even with my own wife, who I considered very attractive. I had seen it as rather inconvenient interaction, the way some men are, all bark and no bite. One day, Chris's wife came by and asked me to keep an eye on him. She thought he was being unfaithful to her. Chris also asked me to drive by his house and check on his wife. He thought she was cheating on him. Isn't that strange how people think? Although I didn't agree to get involved in the spying on either of these people, it did slightly change my view of Chris and his womanizing. The company was expanding into another town about 50 miles from where I worked. And not many days later, Chris asked me if he could take my wife, who was the waitress manager in my store, with him to the new store to train new waitresses. He said that it would take about a week and that he would get her a room next to his. I told my wife about it. She said that he made her uncomfortable. She didn't say more, but I got the feeling I shouldn't ask her to go. In retrospect, I'm glad I didn't ask her to go. Chris turned out to be a very immoral man. He later went to prison for robbing from the customers at the restaurant. While they were dining, he would send a crew of robbers to break into their homes to steal what they could sell. He received a portion of the take for the information on the customers. He knew almost everybody in that small town and where they lived. When the crooks were caught, they gave Chris up almost immediately. He went to prison with his cohorts. I'll say more about Chris's talents later on. Working in a cafe or restaurant is a different kind of job. You have to learn to work in spurts of great intensity that can last from half an hour to several hours, depending on which day it is. The weekend is always busier than the weekdays. When you experience periods of little or nothing to do at those times, you restock food stuff like salads and toppings and fill table condiments like salt and pepper and napkins. House cleaning is done throughout the day. The margin of profit is very small, so that the work time may vary greatly from day to day. In short, the food service has to limit staffing to times when most needed. Friday and Saturday nights were the hardest shifts to work. Most of the week went by smoothly and at a steady pace. We opened at 10 a.m. to greet the lunch crowd with a pizza buffet and a salad bar. The average day started the night before when we mixed the pizza dough to let it rise before it was rolled into pie shapes. We arrived at the store at 8 a.m. in the morning to make ready for the day's food needs. We rolled the dough into pies and let them rise the second time so they are ready when needed. And we stacked them in the baking pans with covers over each one until we had 15 or 20 high. We set we set them next to the oven to help speed the rising. When done this way, we were always ready for what we expected on weekdays as well as on the weekends. Occasionally, we would have a busload stop and have more than 20 or 30 orders within 15 minutes. That could happen any time of the day or evening. It tested your abilities. I would only allow people able to handle this situation to advance to assistant manager or head waitress who could work alone from 2 p.m. until 5 p.m. when some of the evening crew came on. These people were hard to come by. The busy times were from 11 a.m. until about 1:30 p.m. We were busy, but we didn't have to run. On Friday, starting at 6 p.m. until midnight, we were on fire. It was that way Friday and Saturday. Saturday went from 7 till about 1 a.m. It took a toll, pardon me, it took a toll on everybody that worked that shift. By the time the last customer left, we were usually halfway through the nightly cleanup and prep for closing. We closed the door at 1 a.m. With good timing, we could be out the door at 1:30. Everyone wanted to have good timing so we could go home. We were able to do that almost every weekend. If there is a rule to follow, there is an exception to the rule. That's what happened on this particular Friday night. It was a game night with the biggest rivals. We had more visitors than any normal Friday night. The rush never slowed down from 4 p.m. until just before closing. We didn't even have time to start closing work so we could leave at 1:30. Everyone was on edge and frustrated. At 12:45, a bus rolled up to the Pizza Hut and offloaded 45 people, all hungry, all impatient to get their order, and they were tired. It was the perfect storm in a restaurant. Closing time, workers tired, ready to go home, and behind in cleaning and prep work. I was lucky because I had prepared another batch of dough earlier that evening. We had enough dough to make the needed pizzas. It took more than 20 pizzas to fill the orders. About 2:30, we let out the last customer of the day. We were way behind in the work that needed to be done before we left the building. Many of the workers were asking to go home and come back tomorrow to clean. I couldn't allow the work to go undone. One of the waitresses was over at the uncooked pizza pies that were in the pans that had to be dumped. She took a little bit of dough and chucked it at our dishwasher who was in the dining room helping clear tables. I heard it smack him in the face. I looked up and he had a look of total surprise on his face with a little bit of dough on his forehead. He began to laugh and say, "Oh, you ain't getting away with that." And we all began to laugh. To be sure, it was a laugh to relieve tension, but it was very funny too. Lindell ran to the large dough container and grabbed a big handful and made a small ball and threw it at Betty and hit Mary instead. Mary picked up dough from Betty and threw it at Lindell and hit me. I had lost control of my crew. What followed was the great dough ball fight of the Duncan, Oklahoma Pizza Hut. It was every man for himself, and everyone at work that night got involved. We soon turned up, we soon teamed up, boys against the girls. We used all the leftover dough that we had been tossing out anyway. You were afraid to raise your head above the hiding place because the girls outnumbered the boys. We hooped and hollered and giggled and laughed like little children the whole time it lasted. I think I took the last shot in the back of my head. It lasted about 30 minutes. We finally stopped and had a soft drink. We laughed and giggled the rest of that night as we cleaned up the terrible mess we had made. All of the workers stayed and helped clean the hut so that it would be ready for business the next day. We had dough balls stuck in the windows and to the walls, to the pop dispenser, to the beer taps. They were on the oven and even on the back door. There were dough balls that turned up for 3 or 4 days after that. We didn't get through cleaning until 4 a.m. Everyone that was a part of the great dough ball fight became dear friends. The friendship lasted for many years. In my normal managerial style, I would never have permitted such an outburst, but the spirit of service had gone out of all of us that night. Chris was the general manager for 5 stores located in the 4 county area that surrounded where I worked. About 6 months after the great dough ball fight, Chris took $50 out of the pizza delivery cash bag and asked me to show $50 less in sales as I rang up the delivery sales at closing. I did that for him because he said he would set it right before the next night. He did the same thing almost every night for 10 days. I called the other managers and asked point blank if he was doing the same to them, and I got an affirmative from all of them. He was taking $100 from 2 stores and $50 from the other 3 stores, including where I worked. I didn't know it then, but that was the same time he had a crew of crooks working for him. I don't know why he needed so much money. I tried to get the other managers to go with me to the owner of the company, but they wouldn't. Chris was a dear friend of the owner, and they were afraid to tell on him. I tried to call the owner and discuss the situation. I was told to take my talk to my general manager if I had problem with him. I hung up and I told my wife that I thought I had lost both of our jobs by reporting him to the head office. That happened on a Monday night. And the funny thing about it was Chris didn't come by and take money from the delivery bag that night. But when I got in at 8 o'clock in the morning Tuesday, my door key would not work on the door. Chris had Chris was sitting inside waiting for me. He opened the door and asked my wife to wait in the car. When I came into the store, he asked me to sit down at his table. As I sat there, he began to accuse me of taking money from the delivery bag and pocketing it. I listened to all that he had to say. When he had stopped talking, I said, Chris, you and I both know what happened to that money. He then asked me to return all the keys that I had. I would no longer be needed there. I then said to him, I will quit working for you and not say a word about what you have done. Only if you give me a letter of recommendation so I can use it to get another job. He agreed and he wrote out a letter right there by hand and I gave him all the things he had asked for. I left without any hard words. I said goodbye and good luck. When I applied for unemployment insurance, I was denied because my former employer had accused me of stealing money. When I presented my letter of recommendation in my boss's own hand and signed by him, I was granted unemployment insurance. Poor Chris was fired 6 weeks later and was arrested for running a burglary ring, and he went to McAllister State Prison, the one my grandfather had wrote about. Strange twist of events. I told you my life was odd and things happened that were strange. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story. The next story I'll be presenting is Spanish Gold, and that's a very interesting story. It happened before the end of this story as I took off for a little bit and went to visit my folks. But this next story will be chapter 12, Spanish Gold, and it's a treasure hunt story. And I hope you come back and listen to it when I present it. If you like what I do and enjoy it and get in a hurry, you could go to Amazon and buy any one of my books there. They come in ebook and paperback. Some of them come in hardback. And if you have a hard time finding them, you could go to my web page, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, and it has links that'll take you there. And also on my Facebook page, the Curtis Jones author page on Facebook, it also has links that'll take you there. I hope you enjoyed this, and may God bless you and keep you safe. Subscribe if you want to be notified, and hit the bell. You'll be notified every time I post something new. Hit the like button and share it with your friends. God bless you and take care.